4 outlaws crouched behind the boulders ahead, their leader's broad silhouette rimmed by dawn's light. He'd sworn off killing, but if he faltered now, the child would die. A familiar cackle echoed in the dark, dredging up ghosts of his past. His heart thundered as boot steps scraped closer. 1 bullet left in his revolver. 1 chance. He drew a breath of bitter smoke. By dawn, either he or they would fall, because 6 hours earlier. He rode under a moonless sky, the night air smelling of sagebrush and damp earth. The only sounds were the creak of saddle leather and his horse's soft snort, until a gunshot cracked the silence. He halted, heart pounding. Another shot echoed off the distant hills, then another, then nothing. A thin baby's cry rose from inside the wreck. The outlaw sprinted forward and tore open the hanging coach door. Inside, a young woman with a bloody gash on her forehead cradled an infant to her chest. Her dirt-streaked hands trembled as she aimed a tiny Derringer pistol at him. "Saint, stay back," she gasped, voice raw but defiant. He froze, raising his hands slowly. Cordite and fear hung in the cramped coach. He spoke low over the baby's wail. "I'm not here to hurt you. I heard gunshots and came to help." Rain began to patter on the dust, drops hissing on burning debris. The woman's eyes darted from the stranger to the dead outside. At last, she lowered the pistol and drew a shaky breath. They were going to kill us," she whispered. "They killed everyone else." He gingerly climbed into the wreckage. The sour smell of spilled milk clung to the crying infant. Holstering his revolver, he knelt and kept his voice calm. "You're safe now. Let's get you and the little one out of here." She stared at him, stunned. Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing." He carefully slid an arm under her elbow. "Can you move?" She nodded. With one arm, he lifted the woman, and with the other, he shielded the baby. They made their way out through the broken door. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The infant's cries softened to whimpers against the outlaw's chest as he steadied the trembling woman on her feet. "We have to go before they come back," she said, eyes wide with panic. He glanced at the dark plains behind him. Whoever they were, they might return any minute. He guided her toward his horse, every sense alert for hoofbeats on the wind. Would they survive the night with cutthroats on their trail? He tightened his grip on the reins. The race to dawn had begun. The horse galloped through the drizzle, carrying all 3 of them toward the looming black silhouette of Hellspass Canyon. Grace, as the young woman introduced herself, rode in front of the saddle, the infant swaddled and clutched to her chest. The outlaw held the reins from behind, his coat draped around mother and child to keep them warm. Rain and sweat mingled on his skin as he scanned their back trail. "There's a town on the other side of the canyon," Grace said over the wind. Her voice was fragile but determined. "Mesa Flats. We were headed there." "I know it," he replied. A fork of lightning flared, illuminating towering cliffs ahead. The only way through was a narrow pass carved into the canyon wall. The main road cuts through Hellspass. It's shorter, but... Grace finished the thought. "Outlaws control it at night. I heard them say no one crosses without paying in blood." She shivered, drawing the sleeping baby closer. In the brief flash of light, he saw tears on her lashes mingling with the rain. The sight tightened a knot in his gut. "We'll get you there by dawn," he assured her, raising his voice above the rising wind. He didn't add what they both knew. Dawn was only a few hours away, and the canyon ahead was notorious. He urged the horse onward, hooves splashing mud. The acrid smell of wet sage filled the air as they left the open plain and entered the throat of the pass. The wind funneled between high rock walls, wailing like a ghost. Grace winced at each eerie howl. The outlaw noticed she was barely staying upright, exhaustion sapping her strength. He slowed the mare to a trot and steadied her with one arm. The baby stirred and whimpered, but Grace murmured a soothing lullaby under her breath. Her voice quavered, but the soft melody echoed off the stone. They rounded a bend, and a faint light winked through the dark, a lantern. He tensed, smelling wood smoke on the wet air. An old cabin stood tucked against the canyon wall ahead, yellow light spilling from its window. Relief and caution warred in his chest. "Easy now," he whispered. Could it be refuge or a trap? As they approached, a rifle's silhouette appeared in the cabin doorway, backlit by the lantern glow. The outlaw's hand hovered near his holster. Thunder boomed overhead. "Who's out there?" called a gruff old voice. Even at a distance, the outlaw recognized the tone and felt a flood of relief. "It's Boone," he answered hoarsely. It had been years since he'd spoken his own name out loud. "I've got travelers with me. We need shelter, Jed." A pause, then the rifle lowered. "Boone, you old fool," the voice huffed. "Get in here, quick." The outlaw exhaled. He gave Grace a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder, but even as he guided the horse toward the promise of a dry roof, a chill raced up his spine. In a flash of lightning behind them, he thought he saw shapes on the ridge, dark riders trailing at a distance. He bit back a curse. They had been found. Boone handed Grace down from the saddle and ushered her and the baby into Jed's one-room cabin. The warmth and smell of wood smoke enveloped them, but there was no time to rest. Outside, faint whoops and echoing hoofbeats bounced off the canyon walls. The gang was closing in. Jed Barrows, grizzled, gray-bearded, and still wiry despite his years, barred the door behind them. "Outlaws, eh?" he rasped, already moving to shove a heavy table against the door. Boone gently set Grace in a corner behind the stone hearth. She clutched the baby and stared in fear as the old man tossed Boone a loaded shotgun. "How many?" Jed asked, checking the cylinder of his Navy revolver with practiced speed. "At least 5, maybe more," Boone said. He peeked through a knothole in the log wall. Shadows flickered among the trees outside. A chorus of feral whoops and cackling laughter cut through the night. Boone's stomach turned to ice. He recognized that cackle. Jed cursed under his breath. "Figures they'd show up on my doorstep." He glanced at Boone, eyes hard. "You packin' iron again, son." Boone grimaced and drew his revolver. "Only because I have to." Jed nodded with a sad smile. "I know. Was hoping you'd never need to." A bullet thudded into the door, splintering the plank. Grace stifled a scream as the baby woke and wailed. "Hush, hush," she begged, rocking the child frantically. "Boone," a voice bellowed from the darkness outside. "We know you're in there. You should have stayed dead when you had the chance, you coward." Boone's jaw tightened. That voice, he knew it as well as his own. Clay Briggs, his old blood brother turned bitter rival, the leader of the Canyon Gang. Jed spat on the floor. "They got your scent, boy." Another gunshot blasted, punching a hole through the window glass. A lamp shattered, plunging the cabin into flickering semi-darkness. Boone fired back through the window, the roar deafening. A cry of pain outside told him his shot hit flesh. "One down," Jed grunted. He squeezed off 2 rounds through the door and was answered with a hail of lead that peppered the log walls. The cabin rang with gunfire, the smell of burnt powder and hot lead filling the tight space. A flaming bottle crashed against the outer wall, bursting in a bloom of fire. The dry wood caught with a whoosh, smoke seeping through the cracks. Through the haze of smoke, his lined face was calm, resolute. "I'll hold 'em. You get her and the babe out of here," Jed said quietly. He moved toward the door, reloading with steady hands even as embers licked the sill. Outside, Clay's voice shouted, "Bring me that baby, Boone, or I'll gut you slow." Boone felt his blood run cold. He met Jed's eyes. "Jed, please." Jed managed a crooked grin. "Go on. I ain't got many years left anyhow." Then, with a grunt, he kicked open the door and unleashed both barrels of the shotgun into the darkness. "Run!" he roared. Boone didn't hesitate. He threw an arm around Grace and half-dragged, half-carried her toward the rear window. Suddenly, a sharp crack rang out. Jed's voice cut off mid-shout. Grace sobbed. Boone's chest constricted, anguish and fury twisting inside him. But he forced himself onward, propelling them into the cover of rocks and pines beyond the cabin. Behind them, Clay's howl of rage echoed, "You can't hide, Boone. I'll find you." Boone's hands trembled on his gun. Jed was gone. Flames devoured the only home he'd known in years. Rain hissed on burning timber as the cabin collapsed. In that hellish glow, Boone swore he saw Clay's silhouette amidst the chaos, like a demon in the firelight. Boone set his jaw and plunged deeper into the darkness of the canyon with Grace and the child, the cries of the gang fading behind them. He had saved them for now, but the night was far from over. Boone led Grace and the infant deeper into the twisting canyon, keeping to the shadows of ponderosa pines and jagged boulders. Rain had dwindled to a fine mist, leaving the night damp and eerily quiet except for their ragged breathing. The scent of wet pine pitch hung in the air. Boone's boots squelched softly in mud as they crept along. Behind them, faint shouts echoed off the rock walls. Lantern light bobbed in the distance, a search party fanning out. Boone held up a hand, urging silence. Grace clutched the baby tightly, pressing a kiss to its forehead as if to will it quiet. Only a soft whimper escaped the bundle. They ducked into a cleft between 2 slab boulders as 2 outlaw riders passed along the upper ridge. The distant glow of a torch cast dancing shadows. Boone's heart hammered. One stray cry, and they were done. For a tense minute, they waited. Hoofbeats receded, and the canyon fell silent again aside from the drip of water off the trees. Boone exhaled slowly. In the dimness, he saw Grace's face streaked with tears and soot. She met his eyes, her lips trembling not with fear this time, but with simmering anger. "That man, Clay," she whispered, voice shaking. "He wanted to murder a child." Boone clenched his jaw. "He's done worse," he replied quietly. The admission tasted like bile. He eased a peek around the rock. The coast looked clear for the moment. "We have to keep moving." Grace nodded, adjusting the sleeping baby in her arms. Boone helped her up a narrow goat path, her cold fingers gripping his wrist for support. Each step up the slick stone was perilous. Above, the night sky was beginning to pale ever so slightly. Dawn was approaching. They emerged onto a ledge overlooking a black chasm. Spanning, it was a flimsy-looking rope bridge swaying in the wind. One end was secured to a massive pine trunk at their side, the other to a rocky outcrop across a 30-foot gap. Far below, a swollen creek roared from the earlier rain. Grace's breath caught at the side of the bridge. Boone stepped onto the first plank and felt it wobble under his weight. He grimaced. "It'll hold," he said, hoping he sounded convincing. He took the baby from Grace to lighten her load. "Go on, one at a time. I'm right behind you." She bit her lip and started across, gripping the side ropes with one hand and her skirts with the other. The bridge creaked and bounced. Halfway across, the infant woke and began to cry, the sound rising above the rush of water below. "Shh, shh, almost there," Boone murmured, cradling the baby close to his chest as he followed a few paces behind Grace. But the wailing only grew louder, piercing the canyon silence. A shout rang out behind them. Boone glanced back to see two figures emerge from the trees on the ledge, outlaws drawn by the baby's cries. Muzzle flashes erupted as they opened fire. "Go! Run!" Boone roared. A bullet zipped past his ear with a wasp-like buzz. Grace screamed but kept moving, nearly at the far side. The bridge swayed violently as Boone broke into a run, baby in one arm. Planks rattled beneath his boots. The first outlaw stepped onto the bridge behind him, a knife clenched between his teeth and a revolver in hand. Boone stopped mid-span as another shot tore through the rope railing inches from his head. He fired back once, twice. The gunman yelped and toppled over the side, arms flailing, disappearing into the abyss. Before Boone could breathe, a heavy body slammed into him. The second outlaw had leapt onto the bridge and tackled him with a snarl. Boone's revolver skittered from his hand and went spinning into the darkness below. Grace made it to solid ground and turned to see Boone grappling on the swaying bridge. "Boone!" she cried, voice raw. Boone wrestled with the thug one-handed, the other arm clinging desperately to the bawling infant pressed against his chest. The bridge jolted and creaked with each struggle. One of the support ropes began to fray under the strain, individual fibers snapping audibly. As the outlaw drew a gleaming knife, Boone caught a flash of dawn's first light illuminating the blade. The knife arced toward the baby. Boone roared in fury. In a burst of strength, he drove his forehead straight into the man's nose. Cartilage crunched. The outlaw howled, dropping the knife and loosening his grip. With a swift kick, Boone sent the man reeling. The outlaw lost his footing on the slick plank and went over the side. This one managed to scream as he plunged to the raging river. For a heartbeat, Boone hung onto the ropes, dizzy and breathless. The baby's cries rang in his ears. Grace was at the far end, arms outstretched, urging him on. Behind her, the morning sky was growing lighter. Grace knelt beside them, sobbing in relief. Boone struggled to his feet, every muscle trembling. There was no time to rest, because a tall, dark figure now stepped out of the trees ahead of them, blocking their path. Clay Briggs. He held a revolver in one hand and murder in his eyes. Rainwater dripped from Clay's hat brim as he leveled his gun at Boone. Dawn light revealed the hatred etched on his face. Boone pushed Grace and the baby behind him and faced his old friend turned nemesis under the gray morning sky. "End of the line," Clay growled. His revolver's hammer clicked back. Boone and Clay faced each other at the canyon's edge as dawn broke, gray and cold. For a long moment, neither moved. The only sounds were the baby's soft whimper and Boone's pulse thundering in his ears. "Threw your gun away, did ya?" Clay sneered, gesturing at Boone's empty holster. His revolver stayed trained on Boone's chest. Just beyond that muzzle lay Grace, half shielding the infant with her body on the ground. One twitch of Clay's finger, and she'd be gone. Boone's hands balled into fists. "You always were too soft," Clay spat, running off to play honest man while the rest of us took the fall. His voice was low and venomous. "Jeb died because of you, my own brother, and you never came back." Boone's throat tightened. Jeb, Clay's kid brother, had been barely 20, gunned down in the botched robbery the day Boone quit the gang. Boone had tried to put that guilt to rest, but here it stood before him, breathing fire. "I'm sorry," Boone said hoarsely. His eyes flicked to Grace and the baby, then back to Clay. "But don't punish them. This has to end, Clay. There's no need for more blood." Clay's face twisted. "Is that what old Jed taught you? To beg for mercy?" He stepped closer, keeping his aim steady. "You're still the coward who ran? Maybe I should kill that brat first, so you feel a fraction of my pain." He shifted his aim toward the wailing bundle. "No!" Boone barked and sprang between the gun and the baby. Clay's shot cracked like thunder. In Clay's face he saw nothing but years of hatred and a flicker of triumph. "That all you got?" Clay taunted, looming over Boone. "Not even gonna draw on me. Pathetic." In that moment, Boone realized Clay expected him to die on his knees, unarmed and broken, a moral man until the end. Lightning pain jolted through Boone's arm, but a different surge burned through his chest now. Not just anger, but resolve. Clay thumbed back the hammer for the killing shot. Boone's good hand shot to his boot. In one swift motion, he whipped out Jed's old skinning knife, the one he'd tucked there when no one was watching. Clay's eyes widened. Boone lunged upward with a guttural roar. The blade plunged into Clay's gun arm. Clay howled, his revolver clattering from his grip as they crashed to the ground. Boone knocked the weapon away and pinned Clay beneath him. Clay's face contorted with shock and fear as Boone raised the bloody knife. Rain began to fall again, a light drizzle mingling with the blood and mud on both men. Clay bared his teeth. "Go on," he hissed through the pain. "Finish it. You're no better than me." Boone's chest heaved. His knife hand trembled in the air. He could end it now. End Clay's life and be done with this nightmare. Every muscle in his body screamed for retribution. Clay had hurt so many, killed Jed, threatened a child. He deserved no mercy. Grace's voice rose softly behind him. "Boone, please." The baby had fallen silent, watching through big, wet eyes. Boone glanced at that innocent gaze. He remembered the tiny fingers gripping his coat, a fragile life trusting him completely. Boone slowly lowered the knife. "I won't become what I was," he whispered, as much to himself as to Clay. His decision hung in the air with the coming light. A flicker of confusion crossed Clay's face at Boone's mercy. Then rage twisted his features. With a snarl, he ripped his wounded arm free and pulled a hidden pistol from inside his vest. Grace screamed a warning. Boone spun as a shot rang out. Clay stood rigid, his own gun smoking in his hand, and a red stain blooming on his vest. Grace's little Derringer pistol clattered from her trembling fingers. She had fired the only shot she had. Clay staggered, shock in his eyes. He let out a choking gasp, then collapsed backward onto the rocky ground. His pistol slipped from his grasp. The canyon fell quiet, save for the patter of rain. Boone crawled to Clay and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. Nothing. Clay Briggs was dead, felled by Grace's hand in a final act of protection. Boone closed his eyes, a tear mixing with the raindrops on his face. They had survived the longest night. Later that morning, Boone, Grace, and the baby emerged from the canyon's mouth. Warm sunlight bathed their bruised faces. With slow steps, they headed toward Mesa Flats, visible as a dusty outline in the distance. Each carried wounds unseen and seen, yet in the new day's glow, those burdens felt a little lighter. Grace reached over and gently took Boone's uninjured hand. He returned a faint, tired smile. The baby gurgled softly between them, as if sensing the peace that had settled with the morning. Boone paused on a rise overlooking the green valley ahead. Behind them lay the shadows of Hellspass Canyon, now shrinking in the growing light. He tipped his hat back and let the sun wash over him. It was the first sunrise in years he didn't greet with fear or regret. Grace squeezed his hand. "Come with us," she said softly. It wasn't a question, but an offering. Boone looked at the child blinking up at him, then at Grace's hopeful face. He nodded. Perhaps his trail didn't have to end in loneliness. Perhaps, after all his sins, he had finally earned a chance to start anew. As they walked on together toward town, Boone dared to believe that the worst was behind them and something better waited just over the horizon. Could a man who walked in darkness find redemption in the light of dawn?